Insights on ticks.
My name is Katy Martin. I am an assistant professor at Iowa State University in the Department of Pathology at the College of Veterinary Medicine. So my day-to-day involves teaching veterinary students, performing research projects regarding parasites and their host interactions, as well as doing diagnostic service for both the Department of Veterinary Pathology and the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab.
Tick-transmitted disease in Iowa cattle.
The ticks that we commonly encounter in Iowa are going to be Ixodes scapularis, which is the black-legged tick or the deer tick. We also frequently see Dermacentor variabilis, which is commonly called the American dog tick. And then we also have Amblyomma americanum, which is the Lone Star tick. More recently, in June of 2025, Haemaphysalis longicornis, the Asian Longhorned Tick, was identified in the state of Iowa. So the tick life cycle varies a little bit between specific ticks, but in general, ticks behave as three host pathogens. And so what they do is they typically need to feed on a different host for each life cycle stage. And so the tick life cycle includes the life cycle stages of egg, larvae, nymph, and adult. So if we start with the adult stage, following mating, the female tick will lay her eggs in the environment, and then those eggs will hatch to the larval stage, which will try to encounter its first host. Those larval stage ticks are very, very, very small. They're really hard to observe. They're oftentimes talked about being smaller even than the period on sort of a piece of paper, typed paper. So very tiny, hard to observe on a host. So those ticks oftentimes are going to infest smaller hosts, such as rodents, squirrels, rabbits, that sort of thing. So those larval ticks will feed on that first host, then they will drop off following their complete blood meal. They'll drop off of that host, they'll be in the environment where they will molt to the nymph stage. That nymph stage will then find its host, which oftentimes is another small mammal, small rodent, but can be larger mammals as well. And some of that has to do with the specific tick that we're talking about. Some ticks are very host specific and others are considered more promiscuous or have a wider host range. So that nymph will do the same thing. It will find its host, feed to repletion, meaning it takes a complete blood meal, then it will drop off of that host, be in the environment where it molts to the final adult stage, and then the adult ticks will again find their host, which tends to be a larger host, such as a cow, human, horse, deer, things of that nature. And so once the adult stage ticks complete their blood meal, they will then mate on the host, and then the female will drop off and then lay her eggs in the environment, and we're right back to the beginning of that life cycle. We will talk about some interesting differences in the life cycle of Haemaphysalis, but that is kind of the general overview of the basic three-host life cycle for ticks. So thinking about the life cycle, we can also discuss how ticks act as vectors for various pathogens. So pathogens can be transmitted either between life stages of the tick. So for instance, a tick could acquire a bacteria as a larval stage tick and then maintain that infection through its nymphal and adult stage, and therefore pass that bacteria to the host that it feeds on at those nymphal and adult stages. We also have examples of organisms that can be transmitted transovarially. And what that refers to is when the female tick harbors an infection and she is able to pass that infection to all of her offspring or all of those eggs, meaning that she gives rise to an entire new population of ticks that is already infected with a pathogen at the larval stage. That's relatively rare. Most pathogens are transstadially transmitted, but there are only a few examples of organisms that are transovarially transmitted. So when we're thinking about disease transmission from ticks, and especially when we're talking about cattle and other hosts, it's easiest to sort of split those up into the diseases that impact those different hosts. So first, we'll talk a little bit about the risks that these ticks can pose to human hosts. And so with Dermacentor variabilis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever is a pathogen, or a disease, I should say. The pathogen is Rickettsia rickettsii, which can be transmitted to humans. So that's going to cause a febrile illness, and oftentimes with that illness you'll see a rash develop. And so again, that's associated with Dermacentor variabilis. Ixodes scapularis, that deer tick or black-legged tick, many people are aware that that is associated with Lyme disease, caused by the bacteria Borrelia burgdorferi. And so that is going to impact humans as well as other hosts such as horses and cats and dogs. Then Amblyomma americanum is really quite in vogue these days because it is associated with a very interesting syndrome known as red meat allergy. So the common misconception is that this is something that you acquire from ingesting red meat. So you do not become allergic to meat by eating that product. The issue is that this tick possesses a sugar or carbohydrate called galactose alpha-1,3-galactose within its saliva. And so when the tick bites a host, most commonly a human, we will see that they become sensitized to that carbohydrate. And unfortunately, that same sugar is present in the meat of almost all mammals, excluding humans. So that's why we're able to develop this sensitivity to it, because we don't naturally possess it. Because that sugar can be found in red meat or the meat of other mammals, as well as dairy products, following the bite of a tick where we become sensitized to that carbohydrate, we can then react with an allergic type reaction. In some cases, it can be so severe that you develop an anaphylactic reaction. Cattle are susceptible to a few different tick-borne pathogens. In Iowa, the ones that we are most focused on are going to be bovine anaplasmosis. So anaplasma can be transmitted most commonly by Dermacentor ticks in this state. And then our new invader, this Hemophysalis longicornis, the Asian Longhorned Tick, is associated with a disease that presents with very similar symptoms. So things like anemia, lethargy, weight loss, abortions, and sometimes death loss. And that's going to be Theileria orientalis, genotype Ikeda, which again is transmitted by the Asian Longhorned Tick.
Asian Longhorned Tick in Iowa.
The Asian Longhorned Tick is an invasive tick species that was first reported in the United States in 2017 in New Jersey. Now that the USDA has had time to look back through some of the sample stores that they had, we've realized that this tick has probably been in the United States for a fair bit longer than that, perhaps back to 2010 or earlier. So the tick has been around in this country for several years now, but had not made its way to Iowa until it was, well, or at least that we knew about. So we first identified the tick in Iowa in June of 2025. And so Hemophysalis, as I alluded to when we talked about the tick life cycle, has a few unique characteristics. The primary one being that the females can reproduce parthenogenically. And what that means is that the female does not require a male tick to mate. So the female is able to give rise to a large population of eggs without mating with a male tick. In terms of invasive species, that's very problematic because the introduction of a single female tick can give rise to a population. And so when we talk about Hemophysalis, we have sort of two categories of concern for cattle. The first being the direct impacts from the tick. So because we can have a female give rise to a large population of ticks on her own, we end up with really high infestations on cattle. So the farms that have been impacted by Hemophysalis, it was shocking to see the number of ticks on individual cattle versus some of our more commonly encountered ticks such as Dermacentor or Ixodes. So these really large burdens are actually capable of causing exsanguination or death due to blood loss in extreme cases. So that's not going to be the most common occurrence, but it is possible due to these heavy burdens. More likely, we can have enough blood feeding by these heavy burdens to cause things like anemia, decreased production, and perhaps other negative impacts. So that's the first category. That's direct impacts from tick blood feeding. The second category of concern is going to be hemophysalis acting as a vector for the disease theileriosis caused by Theileria orientalis genotype Ikeda. So there are many species of Theileria out there, some that impact cattle, some that impact other hosts. But this specific genotype, Theileria orientalis genotype Ikeda, is considered highly pathogenic. And so this disease is actually caused by another parasite, a protozoan parasite that infects both white blood cells and red blood cells. So the disease presentation in infected cattle is actually quite similar to anaplasmosis. We see things like anemia, jaundice in extreme cases. We can have abortions in pregnant animals, lethargy, typically some mortality that can range from 1 to 5% most commonly, but we can see mortality events as high as 20 to 50%. And so one difference between theileriosis and anaplasmosis in cattle is that oftentimes with anaplasmosis, calves, which are usually the most susceptible to clinical disease, are actually pretty resistant to anaplasmosis. So animals under 2 years of age typically do not have clinical signs due to anaplasmosis. That is not the case with Theileria. So calves infected with Theileria orientalis genotype Ikeda will demonstrate clinical signs and could succumb to that illness. The other difference between anaplasmosis and theileriosis in cattle is going to be that we do not have any approved treatments available for Theileria in cattle. Not only do we not have any approved treatments, but we really don't even have any off-label treatments that are considered highly efficacious. And so unfortunately, in these impacted herds, all we can really offer is supportive care. What is expected based on how Theileria is impacting other species and what we've witnessed in other situations is that typically we will have sort of these acute outbreaks where the animals are naive, they have not experienced that pathogen before, making them more susceptible to disease. But at a certain point, that disease will become endemic in the population. It will be more widespread. Cattle will have been exposed to it. And then we will see fewer susceptible cattle and fewer acute clinical outbreaks. And so, for the next several years, as this tick and pathogen make their way through the state of Iowa, unfortunately, we will likely see losses due to this organism. But over time, as we reach more endemic levels, hopefully some of that will taper off and we will have a more stable situation in terms of theileriosis in cattle.
Asian Longhorned Tick and humans.
Yes, so humans can be a host for the tick itself. So Hemophysalis longicornis would feed on a human, but humans are not susceptible to Theileria orientalis genotype Ikeda. So you are not at risk for developing theileriosis from Hemophysalis bites, but the tick itself is, again, what we would consider more promiscuous, has a broad host range, and so you could be a host for the tick.
Producer environmental prevention measures.
There are two primary strategies for preventing and controlling tick infestations on a cattle herd. So the first is going to be habitat modification, and then the second is going to be products that can be applied to cattle that are going to act as repellents. And so when we think about habitat modification, when we discuss the tick life cycle, I mentioned that between each stage, those ticks are going to be in the environment for their molting. And so ticks in the environment are looking for protection from desiccation or drying out. They want a really high humidity environment, as well as just protection from other environmental stressors. And so what we can do is try and remove that protection for those organisms. So these ticks really thrive in tall, brushy areas. And so what as much as we can do to remove some of that vegetation from pastures, wooded areas, preventing cattle access to those wooded areas, mowing tall grasses, that can be helpful. And so some of those are going to be high input activities. So this isn't necessarily something that we think is going to be easy for all producers to go out there and do. But certainly if you live in a high risk area, it might be worth it to take the time or spend the money to have those activities taken on. And so again, things like mowing around the pastures, you can almost create a barrier if your pasture kind of is butted up to a wooded area. So creating a barrier of short grass or even gravel between pastures and wooded areas. Fencing wooded areas off if the cattle currently have access to those, and then getting rid of brush or brushy areas that are present in that pasture can all be really helpful. Maintaining shorter pastures is helpful in terms of tick prevention, but unfortunately there are some trade-offs, of course, with having enough grass available for grazing, and that can actually have some different impacts on nematode transmission. So this is all going to be about weighing risks and benefits to some of these activities. So again, knowing whether you're in a high-risk area for Hemophysalis longicornis is really helpful in determining what strategies are going to be most beneficial for your herd.
Producer cattle application prevention measures.
So in addition to habitat modifications that we discussed, there are products available that can be applied directly to cattle. And so those are going to come in a few different categories that most of you are probably already familiar with. So the first category, and this is going to be in order of most to least efficacious. So I'm going to start with the application method that is the most helpful in reducing tick burdens and preventing tick infestation, and then we'll kind of go down the list to the less effective methods. So the most effective application method is going to be spraying cattle. So applying products, permethrin or organophosphate-based products directly to the animals. This is going to allow us to ensure that you cover the entire animal with that product, and it's going to be the most efficacious method. Now, obviously, the most efficacious is also labor intensive. So again, you have to think about these things in concert with your own facilities, your practices, and then again with the risk that is present in your area. So in addition to spraying, the next most efficacious method is going to be the use of pour-on products. And so those can be things such as ivermectin-based products, like ivermectin or doramectin. And so those can be really beneficial to use sort of in the spring, kind of when those animals are first turned out into a pasture, because that's going to be the time of year that they might first encounter those ticks. So we can help to prevent that initial infestation and hopefully sort of lead to a lower population of ticks overall. Another category of products that are available and quite convenient to use are insecticide or acaricide impregnated ear tags. And so these are ear tags that might be impregnated with macrocyclic lactones or permethrin. And they do have some activity for tick prevention and tick control, but generally they do not provide full efficacy on the entire body of the animal. And so again, they can be used as an adjunctive control method, but you wouldn't want to rely on these, particularly if you are in a really high risk area for Hemophysalis. The final category of tick control methods is going to be self-application devices. So that will be things like back rubbers or dust bags. And so those, again, can be very convenient to use because it's not something that requires hands-on activity with those cattle. However, we do want to ensure, to get the most efficacy out of these, that those are placed in a way that the animals are made to walk through those on a daily basis. So, putting them in an area where they have to walk through that in order to reach their feed or a mineral or their water can be very beneficial in terms of helping those have the most activity that they can. The other thing that you want to be aware of when you utilize those is that you want to ensure that they are maintained to be full or recharged throughout the season. So you don't just want to put them out and forget about them for the rest of the year. You want to ensure that those do still have product available in them so that the cattle are receiving protection from those devices. When deciding what products you want to use with cattle, it is very important that you are always following the instructions that are provided on that label and not utilizing that in a way that would be either unsafe or not as efficacious as anticipated.
Human prevention.
So one of the most important things to do for humans in terms of tick prevention is going to be performing tick checks. And so that's going to just simply involve checking the entire body for the presence of any ticks. And if you do encounter one that is attached, you want to be sure to remove that appropriately. So with tweezers, grasping at the mouth parts of the ticks and pulling that tick directly off. If one is found embedded or attached, it can be very helpful to place that tick in something like rubbing alcohol and save that in case you do develop any symptoms. That can be very helpful for your physician in the future. So you don't necessarily need to bring every tick that you find on yourself to the doctor, but in the case that you do develop clinical signs, that can be a helpful piece of the puzzle for them to have. So in addition to tick checks, doing things such as wearing long pants and long sleeves when you're outside can be helpful. And then there are products that are marketed for humans as well in terms of repellents. So when selecting a tick repellent for use as a person, you want to look for something that is EPA registered. So these are going to be the compounds that are going to be tested for both safety and efficacy for human use. And so some of the common ones are going to be things like DEET, permethrin, picardin, oil of lemon eucalyptus, and then compounds such as IR3535. So permethrin is one that is interesting because it can actually and is marketed as a formulation that is going to be applied directly to the clothing. So that's something that if you say are going to be hiking frequently, you might choose to treat your, your hiking pants and your hiking shirt or something like that prior to any of those outdoor adventures. The other products that I listed, things like DEET, picardin, those are going to be applied directly to the body to be used as a repellent. So again, when you're looking for those, find things that are EPA registered, and then of course follow the instructions for use that are provided with that product.
Iowa State University Tick Research.
So right now I have a study ongoing that is supported by the IVMA preconditioning funds. And so what our goal would be to determine the extent of the longhorn tick in the state of Iowa. So we have identified this tick in a handful of counties, primarily on the southeastern portion of the state, but it's likely that the tick distribution has already spread far beyond those regions. And so our goal is to collect specimens both from cattle as well as from public lands and other premises around the state to try and see if we can pinpoint where in the state this tick is currently present in order to identify those locations as higher risk and therefore allow cattle producers and veterinarians to work together to come up with their plan for your specific herd. So again, some of the recommendations for tick control and prevention are going to be time and effort intensive. And so we want to know that we are recommending those things to people that are in high-risk situations rather than just giving a blanket recommendation across the state when maybe it isn't completely necessary to take on all of that habitat modification in every area at this time.
Producer call to action.
We are looking for cattle producers to be involved in this project. So we do have some students that are going to be available to come to premises or other locations to perform surveillance activities. So things like tick dragging and flagging. So that's simply walking around with a large panel of material and seeing if they can collect any ticks from the environment. We would also welcome any submissions of ticks that are collected from cattle on your property, and you can contact parasite@iastate.edu if you want more questions for specifics about that. But again, any ticks that you collect from cattle specifically on your property or that you encounter in the environment would be welcomed. And if you would be willing to have our student visit your location to perform some of those surveillance activities, that would be very, very much appreciated, and should be a low effort activity for you. The student will do all of the walking around and the picking of the ticks, so that would be very helpful.